Okay, so we're going to loop back around to the very beginning of the book. For this part, you're going to kind of watch a little bit when I like show the book title and all that kind of good stuff. So hang on one second. Let me share my screen. Okay, and that's the end. All right, I'm going to pause it here for a second because I'm going to do another exercise where we go back and look at the beginning. So I'm just going to pause it for one sec. Okay, so we're picking back up at the beginning of the book so that we can kind of tie everything together. All right, so I have the Simon and Schuster 60th anniversary edition. This is what it looks like on the cover. It's basically looks like a book cover, and then it's like matches are part of it, right? So great book art. We'll talk about that in a second. Um, if you look at the inside cover of my book, I have all of this writing, and each of these different colors represents a different motif or symbol or illusion that I'm following. The major philosophies in this one that we explore are Plato's allegory of the cave, Descartes' cogito ergo sum, which we're going to get into now, and then Heraclitus's stream. Specifically, Heraclitus's stream, the idea of you can never step into the same stream twice. So, going into learning or experience, it's going to be different every single time. Um, we'll also look at the idea of the ship of Theseus a little bit. So, that happens as well in the course. Okay. So, I want to go back and as part of wrapping all of these things together, I want to read the introduction to this, which was written by Neil Gaiman. Sometimes writers write about a world that does not yet exist. We do it for 100 reasons. Because it's good to look forward, not back. Because we need to illuminate a path we hope or we fear humanity will take. Because the world of the future seems more enticing or more interesting than the world of today. Because we need to warn you, to encourage, to examine, to imagine. The reasons for writing about a day after tomorrow and all of the tomorrows that follow it are as many and as varied as the people writing. This is a book of warning. It is a reminder that what we have is valuable and that sometimes we take what we value for granted. There are three phrases that make possible the world of writing about the world of not yet. You can call it science fiction or speculative fiction. You can call it anything you wish. And they are simple phrases. What if only, and if this goes on? What if gives us change, a departure from our lives? What if aliens landed tomorrow and gave us everything we wanted, but at a price? If only lets us explore the glories and the dangers of tomorrow. If only dogs could talk. If only I were invisible. If this goes on is the most predictive of the three. And although it doesn't try to predict an actual future with any of its messy confusion, instead, if this goes on, fiction, takes an element of life today, something clear and obvious and normally something troubling, and asks what would happen if that thing, that one thing, became bigger, became all pervasive, changed the way we thought and behave. If this goes on, all communication everywhere will be through text messages or computers, and direct speech between two people without a machine will be outlawed. It's a cautionary question, and it lets us explore a cautionary world. People think, wrongly, that speculative fiction is about predicting the future, but it isn't. Or if it is, it tends to be do a rotten job of it. Futures are huge things that come with many elements and a billion variables, and the human race has a habit of listening to predictions for what the future will bring and then doing something quite different. What speculative fiction is really good at is not the future, but the present. Taking an aspect of that that troubles or is dangerous and extending it and extrapolating that aspect into something that allows the people of that time to see what they are doing from a different angle and from a different place. It's cautionary. Fahrenheit 451 is a speculative fiction. It's an if this goes on kind of story. And Ray Bradbury was writing about his present, which is our past. He was warning us about things. Some of those things are obvious, and some of them, half a century later, are harder to see. Listen, If someone tells you what a story is about, they're probably right. If they tell you that this is all the story is about, they are definitely wrong. Any story is about a host of things. It is about its author. It is about the world that the author sees and deals with and lives in. It is about the words chosen and the way the words are deployed. It is about the story itself and what happens in the story. It is about the people in the story. It's polemic. It is opinion. An author's opinions of what a story is about are always valid and are always true. The author was there, after all, when the book was written. She came up with each word and knows why she used that word instead of another. But an author is a creature of her time. Okay, so I know it's not much as far as like consolation. Ray Bradbury wrote this book, and it's a male book. The two female archetypes that we have in this are Mildred and Clarice. And one of them is your manic pixie girl who clearly has like some undiagnosed ADHD, or maybe I'm just projecting. And she is the clarity for Montag. That's why her name is Clarice, right? She is the clarity. She is the moon that brings him out of the cave of ignorance that Plato describes. And because she is a softer version of light, she is a softer version of intelligence. And isn't that convenient that a young girl is the softer version of intelligence for someone, specifically a guy? And his name is Guy. And then you have Mildred, who is moldering, and she's moldy, and she's basically the leftover remnants of a society that trained her to be nothing more than an empty shell of a human being. So much so that she has a snake that is ingested that takes the poison out of her. You know, that poison, that one-eyed snake that goes down in her and sucks all the poison out. The poison is her thinking, right? It is the thinking of the pharmacon. It is the drug that is written down in books, but it is the thinking that is the problem, and it gets sucked out of her. And the next day she thinks that it doesn't really happen and she's just kind of hungry, right? And so those are the two female representatives. And it's not much consolation, but at least Neil Gaiman is talking about a female author in this being the one who makes the choices and the decisions. I know it's not a lot of consolation, but it's good to know that he is at least recognizing that when it comes to language, it's important that we have representation for everyone. So I'm just going to rewind that one little part because I think that it's important as a female who really loves this book. It is about its author. It is about the world that the author sees and deals with and lives in. It is about the words chosen and the way the words are deployed. It is about the story itself and what happens in the story. It is about the people in the story. It's polemic. It is opinion. An author's opinions of what a story is about are always valid and are always true. The author was there, after all, when the book was written. She came up with each word and knows why she used that word instead of another. But an author is a creature of her time, and even she cannot see everything that her book is about. More than half a century has passed since 1953. In America in 1953, the comparatively recent medium of radio was already severely on the wane. Its reign had lasted about 30 years, but now the exciting new medium of television had come into ascendancy, and the dramas and the comedies of radio were either ending for good or reinventing themselves with a visual track on the quote-unquote idiot box. The news channels in America warned of juvenile delinquents, teenagers in cars who drove dangerously and lived for kicks. The Cold War was going on, a war between Russia and its allies, and America and its allies, in which nobody dropped the bombs or fired the bullets because a dropped bomb could tip the world into Third World War, a nuclear war from which it would never return. The Senate was holding hearings to root out hidden communists and take steps to stamp out comic books, and whole families were gathering around the television in the evenings. The joke in the 1950s went that in the old days you could tell who was home by seeing if the lights were on, and now you knew who was home by seeing who had their lights off. The televisions were small and the pictures were in black and white, and you really needed to turn the lights off to get a good picture. If this goes on, thought Ray Bradbury, nobody will read books anymore. And Fahrenheit 451 began. He had written a short story once called The Pedestrian about a man who was incarcerated by the police after he is stopped simply for walking. The story became part of the world he was building, and a 17-year-old Clarice McClellan becomes a pedestrian in a world where nobody walks. What if what if firemen burned down houses instead of saving them? Bradbury thought. And now he had his way into the story. He had a fireman named Guy Montag who saved a book from the flames instead of burning it. If only books could be saved, he thought. If you destroy all the physical books, how can you still save them? Bradbury wrote a story called The Fireman. The story demanded to be longer. The world he had created demanded more. He went to UCLA's Powell Library, and in the basement were typewriters you could rent by the hour by putting coins into a box on the side of the typewriter. Ray Bradbury put his money into the box and typed his story. When inspiration flagged, when he needed a boost, when he wanted to stretch his legs, he would walk through the library and look at the books. And then his story was done. He called the Los Angeles Fire Department and asked them at what temperature paper burned. Fahrenheit 451, somebody told him, and he had his title. It didn't matter if it was true or not.
Okay, so I love this story. I'm going to leave that up there for a second just so you can kind of see, but then I'm going to switch over to my face, and here's why. When I was teaching in public school, I was lucky enough to teach some of the smartest kids. And I noticed that among these extremely smart, bright students, that there was a competition to be smarter, right? And they would brag and they would say ridiculous things like, "Oh, I got this incredible score on my AP test, and I didn't even study. It wasn't even a thing. I didn't even try to learn it. I just did because I'm so smart, right?" And a lot of those kids would come to my class and they would struggle because the type of work that we do in my class requires like really deep thinking, and they didn't really get challenged in that way and oftentimes in school. And I will never forget, I had this one particular student who was a great kid, and he said, why bother reading Fahrenheit 451 if that's not even the temperature at which paper burns? Right? Because I had caught him plagiarizing. I had caught him basically, trying to find some stuff and stitch it together and make it, which was really difficult in my class because the types of questions that I asked, for essays that's hard. It was really hard. And this is before AI. So, I had a conversation with him and I confronted him about it. And he basically said, there's no point in reading this book. It's not even an accurate book. It's not even the temperature at which paper burns. And that to me became such a pivotal metaphor for everything that I knew to be wrong about learning, that basically this kid wasn't interested in this book and he saw my class as just being a thing that he had to get out of the way. And he would maybe never want to read Fahrenheit 451 at the level that we were reading. Or maybe he would, but maybe not now as a kid. And I love the fact that Neil Gaiman acknowledges that that truth exists, that, the idea of Fahrenheit 451 being the temperature at which paper can burn. You can literally go on the internet right now and you can find all sorts of different like conversations about, why it's wrong, obviously, but why that even matters. Because it's not the books, it's the ideas in the books, it's the learning and the journey behind the books. So I think that it's really interesting that this book also becomes part of a mirror factory. Like we can talk about the mirror factor being the internet itself and the fact that we can constantly look things up. But the book itself also becomes a mirror factory because if you look at a book like this and you go, well, there's no point in actually even reading it or learning it because the name doesn't like belie any truth, then the whole idea of what you think is true, we have a different idea of what truth is, friend. That this book can offer so much more than that. It can offer so much more than an instruction manual at what temperature paper burns. And I just think that that's a beautiful little metaphor about learning.
The book was published and acclaimed. People loved the book and they argued about it. It was a novel about censorship, they said. No, about mind control, about humanity. No, about government control over all of our lives. No, it was about books. It was filmed by Francois Truffaut, although the film although the film's ending seems darker than Bradbury's, as if remembering the books is perhaps not the safety net Bradbury imagines, but is in itself another dead end. I read Fahrenheit 451 as a boy and did not understand Guy Montag. I did not understand why he did what he did, but I understood the love of books that drove him. Books were the most important things in my life. The huge wall screen televisions were as futuristic and implausible as the idea that people on the televisions would talk to me and that I could take part of it, that if I had a script. Fahrenheit was never a favorite book. It was too dark, too bleak for that. But when I read a story called Usher 2, The Silver Locusts, the UK title for the Martian Chronicles, I recognized the world of outlawed authors and imagination with a fierce sort of familiar joy. When I reread it as a teenager, Fahrenheit 451 had become a book about independence, about thinking for yourself. It was about treasuring books and the dissent inside the covers of books. It was about how we as humans begin by burning books and end by burning people. Reading as an adult, I find myself marveling at the book once more. It really is all of those things, yeah, but it's also a period piece. The four-wall television being described as the television of the 1950s variety shows with symphony orchestras and lowbrow comedians and soap operas. The world of fast-driving, crazy teenagers out for kicks, of an endless Cold War that sometimes goes hot, of wives who appear to have no jobs or identities save for their husbands, of bad men being chased by hounds, even mechanical hounds, is a world that feels like it has roots firmly in the 1950s. A young reader finding this book today, or the day after tomorrow, is going to have to imagine first a past and then a future that belongs to that past. But still, the heart of the book remains untouched, and the questions Bradbury raises remain as valid and important. Why do we need the things in books? The poems, the essays, the stories. Authors disagree. Authors are human and fallible and foolish. Stories are lies, after all, tales of people who never existed, and the things that never actually happened to them. Why should we read them? Why should we even care? The teller and the tale are very different. We must not forget that. Ideas, written ideas, are special. They are the way that we transmit our stories and our thoughts from one generation to the next. If we lose them, we lose our shared history. We lose much of what makes us human, and fiction gives us empathy. It puts us inside the minds of other people, gives us the gift of seeing the world through their eyes. Fiction is a lie that tells us true things over and over. I knew Ray Bradbury for the last 35 years of his life, and I was so lucky. He was funny and gentle, and always, even at the end when he was so old, he was blind and wheelchair bound, even then, enthusiastic. He cared completely and utterly about things. He cared about toys and childhood and films. He cared about books. He cared about stories. This is a book about caring for things. It's a love letter to books, but I think just as much it's a love letter to people and a love letter to the world of Waukegan, Illinois in the 1920s, the world in which Ray Bradbury had grown up and which he immortalized in a green town in his book of childhood, Dandelion Wine. As I said when we began, if someone tells you what a story is about, they are probably right. If they tell you that that is all the story is about, they are probably wrong. So any of the things that I had told you about Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury's remarkable book of warning, will be incomplete. It is about these things, yes, but it is also about more than that. It's about what you find between its pages. As a final note, in these days when we worry and we argue about whether ebooks are real books, I love how broad Ray Bradbury's definition of a book is at the end, when he points out that we should not judge our books by their covers, and that some books exist between the covers that are perfectly people shaped. Neil Gaiman, April 2013.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm
All right. So when we talk about the very end, I think one of the most important things is to recognize that when we do this reader criticism, it's easy for us to go, well, is that what Ray Bradbury meant? And John Green talks about this too, is the reader response aspect of this. The whole point of taking the time to go to every single day, write a dime, like literally a dime novel, because he spent 10 cents every single time to write a page of this book, right? He spent all of this time doing it. And if you think for a moment that all he wanted to do was to spout his truth into the void and not have a conversation with you, the reader, then I don't know what to tell you what you think fiction is for. We hear Neil Gaiman say that fiction teaches empathy. It doesn't teach empathy through an essay. This isn't about rhetoric. This is about taking you as a human being and putting you into the shoes of someone who is changing so drastically as his entire world is changing so drastically. And he has this moment of epiphany. And instead of you having to go through that, you get to step into his shoes and go through it. Right. And so the first time that you read this book, you're like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely fascinating. Like I love all of these ideas. It's very frightening. It's very dark. Like Neil Gaiman talks about his own experience with this book. But then, and most importantly, he talks about rereading the book later, right? And as he rereads the book later, and I hope someday that my kid who told me the thing about Fahrenheit 451, I hope that he finds this course and he's able to watch this video. But the thing about rereading is that every time you reread something like this, the knowledge gets more embedded in you. And the more embedded that it gets into you, the more you will actually live that life, right? So, like the idea of level one is reading, level two is living, and then level three is teaching. Once you live that life and you're like, what does it mean to have empathy for another human being? What does it mean to be aware of the fact that real learning is hard and painful and it's not, immediate, and it's not one of those things that like we can just mark on a standardized test and be like, well, that's what that symbol means, because there's all of these different aspects to it. And for Ray Bradbury, during his time period, the scariest thing that was out there was a television set. Right? That was the scary thing. And now we look at where technology has gone from that and a direction that he could never have possibly been aware that it was going to go. And yet he sort of saw this kind of thing coming, right? So we look at all of those things and we can simply dismiss them and be like, well, they're inaccurate. Clearly, he got the prediction wrong. There are a lot of books of prophecy that get the prediction wrong, but the ideas behind them are right. And if you look at the ideas of the great books in which, we've gone through as far as this book, like we've looked at all of the different, allusions that are in this book, and we've looked at all of the different historical revelations and all of those things. When you do that hard work, you can see what the ideas are that he focuses on, right? The idea that learning takes time, the idea that reading is important, but understanding is even more important. The idea that if you take a world of thinkers and you turn them into a world of producers, ultimately you're going to end up with an empty shell. And that empty shell is going to use its invention to go into some sort of a direction, right? This whole book is about the journey out of Plato's cave of ignorance, right? So, when we talk about the idea of Descartes and cogito ergo sum, the story behind that is that, and I know I'm going to get this wrong. When we think about like being able to question the physical world, I always think of Descartes sitting in a room with a single candle, right? And he's completely by himself. All the windows are shut. He's in a dark room and he's doing the most massive type of skepticism there is. What is the massive type of skepticism there is? Like, if I can literally question everything, what am I? Am I real? Am I a human being? Like, is this a simulation? Am I real? And the only conclusion that he can come to is that I know that I'm real because I'm able to think. And if you're in a world that is constantly trying to remove your ability to think by giving you all of the answers, then it's also in some way removing your humanity. So level one is reading, level two is living, and level three is teaching. Now Montag at the end of the book has become a teacher, and all writers are teachers. But when you give something to someone and you say, here is an idea, I'm going to teach it to you, they get to choose. That's free will. Clarice could choose, and Mildred could choose, and Montag could choose, and Beatty could choose, and Faber could choose, and everyone can choose. Do you choose to live in the land of the four screens, surrounded by comfort and answers, and you don't have to think? Or do you choose to do the hard thing? Do you choose to step in the river of Heraclitus where nothing is ever the same and every single time you learn something new? So, what even is truth? Do you choose to be a critical thinker? Do you choose to just read the book or maybe the spark notes and then take a test and that's it? Or do you want to go deeper? Do you want to do the fun stuff? Do you want to make it into a treasure map and find all the little bits and make meaning for yourself? So I love the fact that Neil Gaiman points out how Ray Bradbury was a product of his time period because so are we. And we are literally seeing like all of these patterns repeat themselves over and over again. And the question is now, cogito ergo sum, do you think, therefore you are? Because if you don't, then what even really are you? Are you just a product of your time that as that time goes away or changes or explodes, there's nothing left of you too? Something to consider.